NASCAR went to New Hampshire Motor Speedway this weekend with both the Cup and the Xfinity Series cars, and weather played a huge factor as we had a lot of rain. We saw the wet weather tires go on the cars in both series, and it ended up being Christopher Bell who came out on top in both races. It's time for the race recap. In the Cup Series, we saw Christopher Bell end up taking the win. We saw Chase Briscoe end up running runner-up. Josh Berry followed him, his SHR teammate, in third, and Kyle Larson finishing fourth, Chris Buescher rounding out the top five. We had 14 cautions for 85 laps in this particular race, and it ended up being pretty wild toward the end of the race. Christopher Bell ended up leading 149 laps, nearly half the race, and that was followed next closest by Tyler Reddick leading 53, and Denny Hamlin leading 43 as well. Stage winners were Stage 1, Christopher Bell, Stage 2, Denny Hamlin. The first stage ran completely green, no cautions whatsoever. Chase Elliott led the first half of the first stage before Christopher Bell ended up passing him for the lead and leading the remaining laps of that stage, starting out as the leader of Stage 2. Martin Truex Jr. ended up passing him and leading some laps there in Stage 2 after some green flag pit stops. We saw the 31 spin and caused the second caution. We saw Kyle Busch, who just had a ridiculously bad day, end up taking out Noah Gragson in a spin, and he'd be involved in a caution later on as well. We saw the two drivers that were facing each other in a bracket this weekend, Joey Logano and Chase Elliott, end up wrecking each other. More so Joey Logano wrecking Chase Elliott than anything else. Corey LaJoie was around several times today, including once under caution. He was also a guy that brought out a caution at lap 202. Martin Truex Jr., who at one point was leading the race, ended up in an accident after he got shuffled back in the pack after a bad pit stop. Kyle Busch ended up crashing again. And Ross Chastain ended up spinning out after the red flag for the rain that ended up showing up at the racetrack, and they put the wet weather tires on. Corey LaJoie also spun. There was also a big wreck following that one. Carson Hocevar ended up going around, and the one that was actually most important on the finish of the race, one of the final restarts, Michael McDowell restarted inside Ryan Blaney and ended up wiping him out after he just got too aggressive on the inside lane. The final caution was for Brad Keselowski, who spun in turn 2 and just couldn't get it refired in time before the leaders came all the way back around. This one was delayed from the start due to weather. Not delayed from the start, they actually moved up the start of the race due to weather, and concerned about that playing a factor in the race, they tried to get it going a little bit earlier. Qualifying was completely rained out. Chase Elliott ended up starting on the pole, being that it was set by points. And speaking of points, after this one we see Kyle Larson and Chase Elliott tied for the points lead, followed by Denny Hamlin, who's 40 points back, Martin Truex Jr., 48 points back, and Tyler Reddick, 60 points back of the lead. And that is your race weekend recap. We talked about Christopher Bell sweeping the weekend, and he did so starting for Joe Gibbs Racing in the Xfinity Series race on Saturday. Ryan, tell us about that race.
The race also started out on wet weather tires. I'm drawing a blank on much of what really happened, but I know Christopher Bell won. Sheldon Creed gets yet another second place finish.
Story of his career so far.
They were 3 wide at the white flag for the lead. I mean, overall, the race was entertaining, the cars and how they drove and stuff. But
Cole Custer, I believe, led most of that race,
yeah,
and he ended up finishing third. Let's talk about the different pieces of news throughout the week. We saw several different things transpire this week, one of which was Christopher Bell, the race winner this weekend, ended up making a big announcement this week and saying that Chase was coming over to JGR next season, and obviously Chase Briscoe's been the car that was rumored to, or been the driver that's been rumored to go over to JGR to take over the 19 car. Yeah, it's a slip of the tongue for sure, but I think we all know that this is what's coming.
Yeah.
Not that big a deal. I know that people were throwing other Chases in there as being somebody that would be the guy that ended up over there, but we all know that it's Briscoe. Not sure exactly who the sponsor's going to end up being or whatever the case is there.
It's expected, like Mahindra tractor is coming over with him. So
they seem to be pretty loyal to Chase as well there. Amidst those different rumors of what drivers are going where in the whole silly season battle, Justin Haley basically pledged his allegiance to Rick Ware Racing, saying that if he asked him to drive for him for the next 10 years, he'd do it. He seems to be very committed to RWR and what's being built there. And I think that's an interesting dynamic. I think they have a pretty good thing going there with their alliance with RFK and the different things that they've got going on there. He was running up front for the majority of the day and made a little bit of contact with the spinning 34 car there on one of the final pit stops. I'm not sure exactly where Justin finished. Let's see if I can look that up real quick, and I'm not seeing it jump off. He ended up finishing 29th, so he obviously had to pit due to that particular issue. Speaking of pledging your allegiance, Daniel Suarez also became a United States citizen this week, and now I believe maintains dual citizenship in both Mexico and the United States. So that was good to see. It's good to see that he's able to maintain a citizenship in this country and probably knows more about the history of this country than most people.
Yeah.
Because of all the qualifications that are required to go through in order to be a United States citizen.
Yeah, I thought it was neat. Beginning of the race, he added the American flag next to his Mexican flag on his car.
Did he really? I didn't see that. That was cool.
Yeah.
That's neat that he's got both flags on there now. I don't think that there's I think it's awesome that he is very committed to his heritage and his Mexican heritage and all that, and I think it's great that he has the Mexican flag above his door, and it's just cool to also see the American flag there next to it. That's awesome. I didn't realize that had taken place. Another little domino in the silly season here is Gene Haas announced that he's going to be retaining ownership of one of the charters from Stewart-Haas Racing, and he is going to be called the Haas Factory Team, and it looks like Joe Custer is going to be the manager of the team. So that kind of leaves you with some pretty good assumptions as to what the sponsor and driver is going to be.
Yeah.
Haas Automation, obviously, I would think is going to be the sponsor of that race car, and Cole Custer has got to be the driver. I don't know if they picked a number. I would assume it's going to be 00 unless they stick with one of their current numbers that they have now. But that's going to be that's going to be neat. I wonder if it just keep the 41 since the Cole's already been in that one time in the Cup Series.
Yeah, I'm not sure what. Because, I mean, obviously NASCAR teams own certain numbers.
Right.
So I don't know. It's probably, I would assume they'd probably keep a number they have.
I would think so, probably. The other part of that is that they're going to maintain a 2-car Xfinity Series team, and they are going to remain in the Stewart-Haas Racing building. I did listen to the Kenny Wallace show this week, Conversations with Kenny or whatever it's called, and he had Greg Biffle on. And he was asking Greg about a lot of the stuff that's going on in NASCAR right now. He said, what do you think of the state of the sport at the moment? And Greg said that really he just thinks that everybody's going towards one goal, and that is to put on entertaining racing. But he and NASCAR seem to disagree on how to get there. And I would say I'm definitely in that camp as well. He said that he would like to see more horsepower, less downforce, and more tire wear. What's this show been saying for how many years now?
Yeah.
I don't know about years, but I've been saying that for years. And it's awesome. Like, I'm glad to see that a driver that you knew drove that race car hanging out all the time. Greg Biffle drove that car really loose all the time. That's where his affinity lies, is for a lot of horsepower, not a lot of grip, especially aero grip. And that's awesome. I love to see that. I'm glad that that's still his opinion. I'm glad there's still some people out there that think the way that I do, and really hope that that's the direction that we end up going, although I don't have a lot of hope for that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the bracket matchups this week. Who did we have matched up this week? I know we had Chase Elliott and Joey Logano.
And Tyler Reddick and Ross Chastain.
Okay. So what were the results of that this week then?
Obviously, Chase beat Logano after Logano tried to take him out.
Tried to take him out,
and let's see, I assume
Tyler Reddick finished 6th. Ross Chastain finished 10th.
Oh, Ross finished 10th.
Yeah, he came back after getting spun.
Oh wow! I was about to say obviously, but I mean, he really came back. So what we have: Chase Elliott versus Tyler Reddick for Nashville.
Wow, that's a matchup I really didn't see coming.
I didn't either.
I'm not sure how far I put Tyler Reddick in my bracket, but I think it was a little ways. I'll have to check it out and see. I don't remember.
I quit looking at my bracket, so
Yeah, I'm pretty sure mine's going to be toast, but I sure didn't have Chase Elliott going this far.
Yeah.
I knew that he was running well, but I just thought he'd get beat by some other drivers, namely Brad Keselowski, for as good as he had been running to this point. Let's talk about our picks for this week. You ended up picking Denny Hamlin, who had a really good run going, and it looked like he was going to finish. He was going to be in the top 5 before the rain delay came out.
Yeah.
And he ended up, just after they put the wet weather tires on, just constantly went backwards. Ended up finishing 24th. Really the last car that didn't have issues on the lead lap, because Ryan Blaney finished behind him. He'd gotten spun out. William Byron was involved in some stuff a little bit. Gregson, Keselowski, Haley, Zane Smith, Hemrick, Logano. Those were the last running cars. So really Denny was the last car that didn't have an issue still running on the racetrack. And even Corey LaJoie finished ahead of him, and he had spun out, 17,000 times today. So, yeah, I really don't know what the issue was with that car and the wet weather tires, but it dropped like a rock for sure. It looked like it was taking on water during that exchange. So that was your pick. Ended up finishing 24th. My pick was Christopher Bell, who ended up winning the race, and it didn't look like he was going to there for a little bit with the way that Ryan Blaney was running him down, and I kept hoping that was going to be the end result. My best case scenario for the weekend was that Ryan Blaney won the race, and that Christopher Bell ended up running second, and I ended up winning the pick over Ryan, but ended up doing that anyway and get 3 points instead of 1 for picking the race winner. Awesome to see that happen. We haven't picked a winner in a while, and you were picking them pretty regularly there for a minute, so glad to see that I am able to get my name on the board again and get a little green highlight in the spreadsheet there. Let's talk a little bit more about the race itself. Christopher Bell, as we said, dominated. There was only 6 lead changes on the day. A lot of them had to do with cars staying out and then getting repassed. But for the most part, Christopher Bell is the guy that kept this thing out front.
Yeah.
In spite of all that, in the lack of lead changes and the fact that this is New Hampshire, which is not one of my favorite racetracks, I thought this was a really good race for New Hampshire.
Definitely since the rain tires on, I think, so it made it a good race for me.
I felt like that definitely added to it, but as much as Bell was dominating, you had long run cars. Before Logano got wrecked, he would run towards the front. It seemed like he had a long run car. Blaney had a long run car. We just didn't get enough long runs to make that something that you saw play out after the first stage ended.
Yeah.
Seemed like we had a lot of wrecks throughout the day. I mean, if you have 14 cautions, you got a lot of wrecks.
Yeah.
And I think that the rain is definitely what added some craziness to it, because after one of those pit stops after stage 2, and we knew that the race was going to be official if the rain came, which didn't end up playing out that way. But that was everybody's assumption. That's why Tyler Reddick stayed out when he did. That really picked up the intensity for a lot of guys, and they started rooting and gouging, beating and banging, and doing all those things that they do, and ended up you really couldn't make too many laps without somebody wrecking.
Yeah.
And it just seemed like guys like Joey Logano on low air pressure drove it into the first turn too hard, wrecked himself and Chase Elliott. Like Kyle Busch, just trying to make something out of nothing. He had gone 2 laps down at one point throughout the day and ended up picking it back up. And he was back on the lead lap when they red flagged the race for rain. And then after they brought the cars back under caution to try to work a little water out of the racetrack, he ended up wrecking under caution and was done for the day. So his streak of misery here seems to continue. But I thought that it was, I wouldn't say easy to pass, but you really didn't hear anything about dirty air or aero dependency today.
Yeah.
And that's a huge, huge deal in good racing. At least I feel that it is. And it just seemed like if you were a fast car, you could go forward, and Christopher Bell had a fast car. And Kyle Larson had a fast car. And Ryan Blaney had a fast car. And Joey Logano, before he got wrecked, had a fast car. Josh Berry, even in there at the end, I mean, he was hanging out toward the front. And he looked like he was going to have an opportunity to win that until his teammate raced him real hard. And nothing wrong with that. That's just the way it was. Even Martin Truex Jr. with getting wrecked. Literally, he had a bad pit stop, went back in the field, and got spun around, ended up making contact with the wall. Still finished 9th.
Yeah.
Because he had a fast car and was able to work his way up through the field. Some other guys to shout out in their finishes. Chase Briscoe, who's going to drive the 19 car next year apparently, finishes second to the guy that made his announcement for him. Josh Berry ended up finishing third. Kyle Larson, who had a little spat on the radio with his spotter Tyler Maughan. Denny Hamlin, as they were racing prior to the red flag for rain, Denny Hamlin seemed to wash up into him a couple times and kind of beat on his door a little bit. And Larson just kind of let it happen and didn't really fight back too much. And Tyler Maughan, his spotter, got on the radio after him and said, "You know why he races you that way? Because you let him." And then Kyle Larson said, "Could you please not talk to me that way?" That's not exactly what he said. I don't view that as any kind of trouble in paradise or anything like that. I think that Tyler Maughan is going to continue to be a spotter without any problem. But I definitely see Maughan's point. Reddick, or I keep calling him Reddick. Larson does get raced this way, and especially by Denny Hamlin. And Denny Hamlin races him that way because he knows he can. Yeah. He can rough him up. He can use him up. We saw him do it a couple times last year, and Hamlin ended up winning the race because of it. And Kyle Larson can do whatever he wants. He's a NASCAR champion. He's won way more races than I ever have. But I just feel like you'd at some point just want to just drive your nose into the back bumper of that 11 car and let whatever happens. Kyle doesn't race that way, and that's one of the things that even though he drives for an evil organization like Hendrick Motorsports, I do like that about Kyle Larson. He will run you fairly, and that's an appreciation that I've always had for him. Chris Buescher, somebody that I didn't think was going to run up front today, ended up getting a top 5 finish. Tyler Reddick, even after gambling on that strategy, still ended up finishing 6th. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. had a good run in 7th. John Hunter Nemechek had a surprising run.
I just looked and saw him there. I'm like, whoa. I think the rain saved a lot of these guys.
He finished 8th. Not the kind of day that he was going to run that way. And like you said, putting on those wet weather tires, once they went back to racing with 70-some laps to go after the red flag and put the wet weather tires on, they never came back off. They put 2 new sets on them, but they were all wet weather tires. 3 total sets of wet weather tires through the latter half of the race. And that allowed, like you just said, guys like John Hunter Nemechek to get up there. Ross Chastain, after he spun, still ended up finishing 10th. Ryan Preece, really all the SHR cars had a good day, finished 11th. Todd Gilliland, he ran up front a lot. Michael McDowell ran up front a lot. He even got a pit road speeding penalty at one point and ended up back at the front before he ended up being a bonehead and wrecking himself and Ryan Blaney. Ryan said after the race, just a move that was never going to work, and he's right. You saw those two chatting about it after the race. I told you when we were watching it, you could see this coming a mile away because Blaney was fast and he was going to run down the 20, and McDowell restarted inside the 20. And the outside lane is what was working right then. So it was going to be Bell and Blaney going to try to get clear of the inside lane, and then Blaney was going to try to run him down. Well, when they went in, Rick Allen was saying it on the broadcast too, that that 34 car, he really needs a win. He's got to be aggressive here, and he sure was. And I could see it just as they were entering turn 1. I said that 34 is going to run the 12 right around. And he did. They went down in the first turn and just banged into him, turned them both around. Disappointing as somebody that was rooting for Ryan Blaney in that particular situation. You just know that people like McDowell are going to make bonehead moves like that. And he still ended up getting back to finish 15th. This is nothing against Michael McDowell. I think he's got a lot of talent that is definitely underappreciated a lot of times. But that's the kind of thing I expect him to do, is do dumb things like that.
Yeah. That's
just the way that his career has always been.
Where'd Blaney end up?
26th? 5th.
Okay.
Eric Jones finished 13th. Harrison Burton, 14th. That was a good run for him. Ty Gibbs, 16th. Never really heard about anything about him, which a quiet day wasn't bad. Chase Elliott ended up 18th. Not sure what the deal was there. He ran inside the top 10 there.
Yeah. I don't know. When they restarted on the wet tires, he drove from the 20th up to the top 10. Then he just kind of stayed in there. And then I think these last few restarts, he just bit him.
Yeah.
He restarted on the inside line, and of course, these late restarts, the outside line was a dry line, and I just think he got bit by restarts.
Outside of that, the only other person I thought we should mention was Alex Bowman, who certainly ran well in the first stage of the race, finished 10th, and then just under one of the cautions that Kyle Busch had spun on, you saw Bowman on pit road just blowing smoke out the exhaust pipe. Obviously, some sort of engine failure there, and he ends up finishing dead last. Unfortunate for him. knowing that he's a hack, he probably missed a shift somewhere along the line and over-revved the motor. That's my guess. I don't know. But no, we've seen some odd engine failures lately, and I could definitely see that being just an issue of trying to find horsepower. And as they run these motors for 3 races now, they're a sealed engine and all that Steve Letarte talked about. I could see that being part of the issue as to why he ended up blowing up. And it's unfortunate for him because he definitely had a good run and is having a pretty good season overall. When you look at the point standings, he is in 12th, and he's had some negative finishes that have really hurt that. I mean, he's run better than that all year long. I don't really know if there's anything else you want to say about this one. I thought it was wild and wet and wacky, and guys spun each other around a lot. Don't like seeing that kind of thing all the time where guys run into each other as often as they did today.
I was going to say, when they initially started on the wets and were running 3 and 4 wide, you saw a lot of passing, but they were also driving respectfully and weren't crashing and stuff. When it starts coming down to these late restarts and stuff, and they just piling into each other trying to get every inch they can. It gets a little aggravating.
Yes, it does.
But
especially as somebody that enjoys pure racing like you and I do. You could as soon as they said rain's 45 minutes out and they had just come off a pit stop, that's where it picked up right there, and they started running into each other constantly, and pretty much from there on out to the end of the race. I think that's about all I got from New Hampshire this weekend.
Yeah.
Thought that our picks looked pretty good this week. Denny was going to run well regardless of where he ended up finishing. And like I said, I don't even want to look at my bracket to see what that thing ends up looking like. But we appreciate everybody that watches and listens and follows along with our show and pays attention to us on TikTok, Instagram, X, and YouTube Shorts as well. So we appreciate you guys consuming our content, seeing what we got going on, and we'll make sure to keep churning it out for you this coming week. And we'll be back after next week in Nashville.